In my family, you know the black sheep, the one who never quite fits in. I've always been the odd one out. My name is Isabel Wilson, and I'm 29 years old. Yet, I felt different from other people for as long as I can remember. Growing up, I was the eldest child of accomplished physicians, Margaret and Robert Wilson. In their environment, my parents were quite the celebrities, often praised for their efforts and successes. However, for some reason, I never felt like I was receiving all that positive energy. My younger twin brothers, Ken and Felix, received all the benefits and attention. It seemed as though I vanished from my parents' sight the instant the two made their spectacular debut. It was mild at first, little things. On birthdays, they would receive the newest toy or a larger slice of cake, whereas I would receive something useful or unmemorable. But as we grew older, the partiality was hard to miss, so evident that it ached. I recall that around the time I turned 10, I had been hinting at this art kit I had seen in a store display for what seemed like forever. It was a basic kit with good paints and brushes. Nothing fancy, but it had everything I needed. When my birthday arrived, I was ecstatic because I thought I would finally receive it. My heart fell as I opened the one present I had, and there it was, a workbook for arithmetic. A workbook. Not precisely what a young artist dreams of. As I entered my teenage years, things continued to worsen. Family getaways ignored what I said. Every journey catered to the whims of Ken and Felix. That winter, if Ken enjoyed skiing, we would definitely be visiting a posh ski resort. When Felix decided to take up surfing for the summer, you can imagine where we were going. Yes, directly to the shore. My suggestions, before I could even finish a statement, were shot down or ignored without even trying to join the debate. College applications followed, and boy, was that ever a sore area. It was when I was 17 that I fell in love with art restoration. I spent many hours in the nearby museum, almost living there and inquiring endlessly about the techniques used to restore ancient, damaged artwork. I would lose myself in the process, seeing myself in the same situation in the future. However, when I eventually informed my parents that I wanted to attend college to study art restoration, their response was, well, let's just say it wasn't what I had hoped for. You would have assumed that I told them I wanted to disappear and join a circus or something. My mother laughed. Really? She said. Art restoration, Isabel? Are you serious? It's not a serious career. And then, with this smug expression on his face, Ken spoke out as if on cue. Yes, Isabel, how about you pursue a career in medicine or something constructive? That proud expression on my parents' faces was the one I had never witnessed coming my way. It was always theirs, particularly Ken. They didn't think I could succeed, but I was committed to making it work. I was so excited to get college admission letters that I was unable to control my emotions. I vividly recall the moment I learned that I had been awarded a scholarship to pursue a career in art restoration. Proud and ecstatic, I raced into the kitchen and waved the letter around like a crazy person. Dad, Mom, I was awarded a scholarship. I was wanting, no, expecting some sort of response to let me know they were pleased for me. But my mother didn't even raise her gaze from her health notebook. She remarked, without giving me a sidelong glance, "That's nice, honey. Have you heard the boys' SAT scores were flawless?" The farewells Ken and Felix received were like night and day from the day I departed for college. It was like a big ceremony, complete with tears, embraces, and pledges of unending support. As they departed for me, Everything was silent. It was almost like any other day in the Wilson home. After 2 years, I was packing up my used laptop and a few pieces of clothing from charity stores in preparation for the bus ride to New, a public school that was not very glamorous, but seemed like the ideal fit for me. As usual, my parents were too preoccupied with their business to consider giving me a lift to the bus stop. It hurt, but I had learned not to anticipate too much by then. But my grandmother Elizabeth was the one who really saw me for who I was in my life. She had consistently provided warmth and empathy when others could not. She appeared that day just as I was ready to depart. With a soft grin, she drew me in, and her reassuring, familiar presence helped me feel noticed. She gently remarked, "Isabel, sweetie, I'm so proud of you," as she pressed a tiny envelope into my hand. Never lose sight of it. More than anything, I was appreciative of her comments and gave her a deep hug. Later, I opened the envelope and saw a check. It wasn't much, nothing that would significantly improve my circumstances, but it was plenty to ease things somewhat. The fact that she saw me, encouraged me, and gave me the impression that I mattered meant more to me than the money could ever convey. That was an uncommon emotion in my life. For me, college was a mishmash of experiences. From one perspective, I felt like I had at last gained freedom from the incessant comparisons to Ken and Felix, from the never-ending struggle for my parents' attention. Without feeling as though I had to prove anything to anyone, I was able to concentrate on my studies and fully embrace my love of art restoration. But on the other side, money was tight, really tight. With my scholarship, I was barely making ends meet, working part-time jobs that paid just enough. I occasionally had to forego meals or purchase used materials since I couldn't afford new ones. Through family conversations and social media, I was unable to avoid learning about my brother's opulent lifestyles. Meanwhile, they were having the time of their lives with lavish frat parties, exotic spring break travels, and internships at esteemed medical facilities. Naturally, our parents covered the entire cost of it while I was working double shifts at a cafe to pay my rent. I would look through pictures of Ken and Felix attending fancy events or relaxing on boats. Though it was difficult, I made an effort to maintain my attention on my own journey. I immersed myself fully in my studies. As time went on, for me, art restoration evolved from a job aspiration to a delightful haven of escape. Restoring the beauty of aging, neglected works of art felt incredibly satisfying. I had the impression that I was discovering untapped potential in both the artwork and myself with each layer of dirt. I removed the thought that I never felt like I belonged at home, but every repair project offered me a feeling of purpose and belonging. I was able to secure an internship at a tiny but reputable local museum during my last year of college. By no means was it a glamorous job. The majority of my days were spent on behind-the-scenes chores like cleaning and arranging storage areas. However, it was my entry point and my opportunity to advance in the industry I loved. When I received the news, I was elated and virtually buzzed with excitement as I called my parents to tell them. Maybe I thought my folks would be proud of me this time. My mother's attitude was predictably, at best, ambivalent. She spoke incoherently and remarked, "Oh, that's nice, dear," obviously not paying much attention. She continued, "Did you hear about Ken's research paper? It will appear in a significant medical publication." She spoke with such pride, and it was difficult to ignore the obvious difference between her response to my news and my brother's. I suppressed the sigh that was about to come out as I forced myself to remain composed. Trying not to shout, I responded, That's great, Mom. Hey, I was considering spending a weekend at home shortly. Maybe we could catch up. I wish I could. Well, I'm not sure that's a good idea, she said in a dismissive and hurried manner. The research papers that the boys are doing will keep your father and me extremely busy. Is that what you understand? As I hung up the phone, I could feel the old knot of hurt and rage developing in my chest. Even though I had traveled this route a lot in the past, this time was unique. Something else surged within me, a spirit of defiance and drive I had never felt before. Instead of just defeat, I had had enough of feeling unnoticed and seeking their acceptance. I was going to show myself that I was sufficient, not to them, but that I was more capable than they had ever thought. Observing my little dorm room, I noted my art books neatly arranged on the desk and the almost completed restoration job strewn all over the floor. Somehow, this little claustrophobic room with peeling paint and broken furnishings had become my haven. I don't require their blessing, I said to the empty room, letting out a deep sigh. I knew the words weren't really accurate, though, even while I was speaking them, despite my best efforts to ignore it. A tiny part of me still yearned for my parents to approve of the person I had grown into and to acknowledge me, though I'd never say it out loud. I hoped that one day they might actually accept me for who I am. My family didn't make a big deal out of my graduation day. My graduation was celebrated with a brief supper at some generic chain restaurant, while other grads were off with tearful hugs, meaningful speeches, and pleased parents. There were no speeches expressing their pride in me or cap and gown pictures, just a routine dinner, as if it were any other day. So, Isabel, what's next? Dad questioned, hardly even looking at me as he skimmed his menu. Even though his tone was informal, there was that familiar undertone of expectation, as if everything I had to say wouldn't quite measure up. I straightened my back and spoke with more assurance. Actually, I received an opportunity to work at a New York museum. Though it's modest, it's a start, and I couldn't be more thrilled about it. Dad scowled and put his menu down. I'm not sure, Isabel. The cost of living in New York is high. What is the salary for this position? My cheeks instantly heated up with humiliation. I grumbled about the starting pay, which was not spectacular at all, certainly not in the eyes of my parents. It was evident how disappointed they were. Thick and weighty, it hovered in the air between us. The remainder of the meal flew by, filled with veiled critiques of my professional decision and the usual comparisons to Ken and Felix's scholastic successes. Their accolades, publications, and promising futures were all shown in stark contrast to my humble beginnings. Upon departing the eatery, my grandmother Elizabeth drew me aside. With gentleness, she said, "Don't let them dim your light, my dear," as her warm hands cradled mine. "You're destined for amazing things." Like Mom did when I left for college, she put another little packet into my hand. With that, there was enough money in the envelope to pay for my first month's rent in New York. I tried not to weep as I gave her a deep hug, but tears filled my eyes. She was the one person who had consistently observed me and unwaveringly believed in me. The ensuing years passed quickly. I put all of my energy into my job and gradually established myself in the field of art restoration. It wasn't always easy. There were months when I struggled to make ends meet and moments when I wondered if I had made the right decision. However, I persisted, propelled by the same willpower that had seen me through countless periods of uncertainty. It was then that I got to know Stephen. With an infectious love for his profession and a crooked smile, he was a struggling graphic designer. We hit it off immediately, connecting over our common passion for art and our experience as underdogs in our fields. We both understood what it was like to struggle every day to accomplish even a small amount of progress and to strive for recognition. He became my rock, my haven in a sometimes stressful and thrilling city. After we had been dating for a while, I thought it was time for Stephen to meet my family. Nothing could have properly prepared any of us for the reality of that first supper. Even if I had braced him for the worst, my parents clearly had different plans. From the moment we sat down, the inquiries began almost immediately, getting sharper with each one. "So, Stephen," Dad began, attempting to seem casual but failing horribly, "what precisely are your prospects for a long-term career?" There was that usual edge to his voice, as if he was about to express disbelief. Stephen moved about in his chair, obviously uncomfortable but making an effort to remain calm. "Well, I'm building my client base," he added, flashing a pleasant grin. "I'm improving, but it takes time." Mom wasn't happy. She threw herself into it without pausing. "And what's your current income?" she said in a pointed manner. "Is it sufficient to sustain a family?" My face flushed. "Mom, that's not." Stephen gave me a comforting squeeze on my hand beneath the table and said, "It's okay, Isabel. I'm not where I want to be financially yet, Dr. Wilson, but I'm working hard to get there." Throughout dinner, the questioning continued unabated, and I could feel Stephen's confidence ebbing with each inquiry, while my own rage began to flare up. Mom grabbed me aside as we were leaving. "I know you think you care about this boy, Isabel, but you need to be realistic," said the lover. "Don't add to the difficulty of your already challenging job path by becoming involved with someone whose future is uncertain." "Mom," I muttered, taken aback by her response. Dad chimed in, encouraging her. "Isabel, your mother is correct. You must consider the long term. Though he looks like a decent man, is Stephen really your best option? You might set far higher goals." Years of repressed annoyance nearly overflowed. As I stood there stunned, they judged Stephen. How could they? How dare they disregard my decisions? Later, reality set in as Stephen and I started organizing our wedding. Our meager finances would hardly support a small ceremony. One evening, I decided to ask my parents for assistance. After spending hours scoring over financial spreadsheets during our weekly phone conversation, I tentatively said, "Mom, Dad, Stephen and I have decided on a wedding date. Although we're attempting to keep costs to a minimum, I was wondering if you would be able to assist, even if it's only partially." It was painfully quiet on the other end. At last, Mom said something, her voice icy. "You're a grown-up, Isabel. You must bear the repercussions on your own if you decide to weed this man." Feeling horrible but not totally startled, I hung up. Grandma Elizabeth saved the day. Thank goodness she didn't hesitate to tell me about the circumstances. "I may not be able to give you the wedding of your dreams, but I want to help make your day special," she added kindly over the phone. She gave a small amount of money, but enough to significantly alter our plans. When the big day finally arrived, I was nervous and excited at the same time. The community hall we had hired was elegantly furnished with glittering lights and a bed of wildflowers. Everyone in our little circle of friends had contributed, from the baked cake to the decorations. As I walked down the improvised aisle, Stephen's smile lit up his face, making all our troubles feel worth it. I was able to momentarily forget about my family's actions, my financial concerns, and my worries as I focused solely on the love in his eyes. However, that moment was destroyed when I saw my family seated in the front row, looking bored and repulsed. There were Mom and Dad, and I heard Mom sulking to Dad about the cheap food and tacky decorations. Even worse were Ken and Felix, who were riveted to their phones and chuckling from the corner. I did my best to ignore them, concentrating instead on Stephen, our vows, and our friends' encouraging faces. I didn't understand how callous my family could be until the next day. My phone was inundated with alerts when I woke up. On social media, Ken and Felix had shared a number of embarrassing wedding pictures. One message said, "Congrats to our big sis on her special day," posted next to a grainy picture of Stephen and me cutting our own cake. Another article mockingly stated, "Nothing says true love like a dollar store wedding," including a side-by-side comparison of our buffet table and an expensive restaurant's gourmet meal. Isabel's wedding versus our average Tuesday lunch. Guess which is which? The comments section was a war zone. My brother's actions appalled several family members. Aunt Sarah wrote, "You should be ashamed of yourself. This is completely unacceptable." Others, though, laughed at it. "But real," said Cousin Tim. That wedding looked like a homeless convention. Looking over the comments made me feel nauseous, but the thing that stung the most was watching my parents' reactions. Rather than chastising Ken and Felix, they encouraged them. "Boys will be boys. It's just a little harmless fun," said Mom. I didn't approach them or ask for an explanation. All I could do was pull away. The yearly reunion of the Wilson family took place 6 months following the wedding. Though I feared going, Stephen believed we should attend, thinking it might be an opportunity to patch things up. We couldn't have made a worse mistake. There was noticeable tension at the reunion. I tried to stay as far away from my immediate relatives as possible for the first hour, making small talk. Then I heard Ken bragging about his most recent lavish vacation, which was, of course, paid for by our parents. A part of me broke. I spoke out so that everyone could hear me. "Must be nice to have Mom and Dad bankroll your entire life." The room grew quiet. Ken gaped at me, stumbling. "What's that supposed to mean?" "You understand precisely what it signifies," I said, releasing years' worth of suppressed resentment. "At last, you and Felix have been handed everything while I've had to fight for the smallest scrap of recognition or support." Mom moved forward, rage coloring her features. "Isabel, stop being such a fool. You've always been treated fairly by us." Though it was bitter, I had to chuckle. "Are you kidding? Please, let's examine what equal actually implies." I began marking instances on my fingers. I attended public school while the boys paid for private education. Nothing for me. Brand new cars on their 16th birthdays. Not to mention the grand prize, $300,000 for their Ivy League educations. But I had to eke out an existence on loans and scholarships. You could have heard a pin drop in that calm room. I was airing our family's dirty laundry for everyone to see, and they were all looking. Mom was as frigid as ice when she finally spoke. "If you're so obsessed with money, Isabel, maybe you should have married someone rich instead of your broke husband." Her remark struck me like a blow. Beside me, Stephen, who had remained silent, tensed up. My eyes filled with tears. "How dare you?" I growled. "None of you are worth Stephen. He loves me for who I am, not for what I can do to make your country club pals think better of him." The reunion descended into anarchy. Words flew. Long-buried hatred spilled forth, and old grudges reappeared. A strong voice broke through the clamor of yelling. "Enough!" Grandma Elizabeth stood, her normally soft visage suddenly stern and furious. As everyone turned to see her, she continued, "I've watched this family tear itself apart for years, and I won't tolerate it any longer. It is shameful how you have treated each other." She turned to face Ken and Felix. It is unforgivable how you treated your sister." The room was silent for a moment. Mom finally lost it. "You don't understand. Isabel has consistently been challenging and a hassle." "No, Margaret," Grandma said, her voice commanding. "The real problem is your blatant favoritism and your refusal to see the damage you've caused." I turned to face the horrified looks on my family members' faces, my grandmother's firm position, my parents' rage, and my brother's smug looks. Something inside me fractured in that instant and then reassembled, albeit in a new way. I said calmly, but firmly, "I'm done. I've had enough of trying to gain your favor. I'm over trying to fit into this dysfunctional household. Please don't contact us. Stephen and I are heading out." The following several months were difficult, but Stephen supported me the entire time. He never once made me feel bad for bringing family conflict into our lives. Instead, he acknowledged my little accomplishments and stood by me through my dark moments. Life has an odd habit of taking you by surprise when you least expect it. A phone call was the beginning of it all. For weeks, Stephen had been putting his all into a proposal for a significant customer, working nonstop. The expression on his face when he answered the phone that lovely Tuesday morning told me something serious had happened. "We succeeded," he muttered. "We have the contract." The months that followed were busy. Stephen's modest design business surged overnight with this major customer, unlocking opportunities we never dreamed of. All of a sudden, we were thriving instead of barely getting by. However, an unforeseen issue arose alongside our success, as notifications buzzed across. My phone buzzed with friend requests from relatives I had long ago rejected and messages from distant cousins eager to reconnect. Then the call I had been dreading arrived. Through the phone came my mother's saccharine voice. "Isabel, sweetheart, we heard the fantastic news regarding Stephen's company. We always believed in you too." The compliments continued, and my father interjected, expressing his pride and their unwavering belief in us. I sat there in startled silence, growing angrier with each lie. "We'd love to see you. Maybe we could celebrate your success as a family over dinner." I jolted out of my reverie. As a unit, I spoke harshly. Just because we have money now doesn't mean we will become a family again. We haven't been one for a long time. My parents unexpectedly arrived at our house, but I refused to let them in. I returned their nice gestures untouched. Instead, Stephen and I focused on creating the life we had always imagined. After diligent labor and astute saving, we finally signed the papers for a stunning apartment in the city center. I shared our happiness on social media, posting a picture of Stephen and me in front of our new home with our keys in hand. Next to it, I included a photo of Grandma Elizabeth, grinning proudly from our most recent visit. "New beginnings and old love," I captioned it. "Grateful for those who've been there through it all. New home, family." As I hit post, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. Grandma Elizabeth, Stephen, and those who supported us through thick and thin were now my family. We had overcome obstacles to create this life for ourselves, despite others doubting our abilities. While I prepared dinner for Stephen and Grandma, gentle evening light filled our new apartment through the windows. Our first official family supper at our new home was coming up, and I wanted everything to go just right. Then a sharp, violent pounding on the front door shattered the serenity. "Isabel, let me in. You're known to be inside." My heart felt icy. Felix and Ken's voices were all too familiar. The door swung open before I could respond, and my brothers, their faces contorted with rage, rushed in. Ken sprang forward, pointing an accusing finger at me. You cunning little, he growled. We knew all along you were planning ahead, but this, even for you, this is low. Startled by the ferocity of his speech, I staggered back. What are you discussing? Felix laughed, an unpleasant, harsh chuckle. Don't act foolish, Isabel. We saw your little social media post showcasing your new flat with Grandma. You think we can't connect the dots? Realization hit me. You believe that Grandma purchased our apartment? Ken mocked. You've been worming your way into her good graces for years, pretending to be the poor neglected child. Now you've tricked her into designating you as the only heir. A wave of rage coursed through me. You don't know what the hell you're talking about. We paid cash for this apartment ourselves, which Stephen and I acquired through hard work. Felix's disdainful gaze swept over the space. Yes, of course you did. Now where's the old bat? Keeping her hidden so we can't reason with her. By now, that insane old lady ought to be buried in a cemetery. I'm eager for her to pass away so I can sell her house and enjoy it to the fullest. Dead silence descended upon the room. For a moment, I considered the possibility that I had misheard those terrifying words. Then a soft voice emerged from the entrance to the living room. So this is how you truly feel about me. Everyone turned to see Grandma Elizabeth standing there, a shocked and disappointed expression on her face. Ken and Felix's cheeks paled as they realized she had overheard their conversation. Grandma, we didn't mean that, Ken stammered, but Elizabeth raised a hand, stopping him. I'm done listening, she said, her tone calm yet assertive. I now know who views me as nothing more than a meal ticket and who genuinely values me. Her presence gave me strength. I believe that both of you should go. They appeared ready to dispute for a moment, but Grandma's mixture of hurt and resolve deflated their feeble explanations. They slunk toward the door. The aftermath of that chaotic evening hit me like a hurricane. I was constantly reminded of the disaster that had just unfolded by my phone's relentless ringing. For what felt like the millionth time, Mom's name flashed on the screen. Despite my better judgment, I answered. Isabel, you must make this right. Your grandma is really upset about the boys. You should make amends and explain to her that everything was misunderstood. With a sour chuckle, I replied, Misunderstood? They admitted to breaking into my house and said they were eager for her to pass away so they could sell her home. Is that misinterpreted in any way? Dad chimed in. They didn't mean it like that. You know how the boys are. They were just having a rough time. What are you upset about? I shot back. Grandma loves me, and Stephen and I paid cash for an apartment. Mom's voice became overly sweet. We understand that you've always felt excluded, sweetie, but you should consider what's best for the family. That inheritance is rightfully your brother's. Avoid becoming self-centered. A part of me broke. Years of repressed hurt and fury erupted. Self-centered. After years of favoritism, you're calling me selfish. You've discounted my accomplishments and treated Stephen and me like we're less than human. And now, you have the arrogance to demand I give up an inheritance I never even asked for. Dad began. Now, Isabel, but I interrupted him. No, I'm through. I'm done with the guilt trips, the manipulation, and everything else. Please don't text, call, or visit my door again. We're done here. I blocked their numbers along with Ken and Felix's. In the days that followed, it felt like chopping off a sick limb, yet it was exactly what I needed to recover. There was a distinct warmth surrounding me as the dust settled. Grandma Elizabeth became an even more constant presence in our lives now that she understood the dynamics of our family, something she had long suspected. Aunt Sarah, who had reached out after the wedding fiasco, became a regular visitor. "I always knew you were special, Isabel," she said, hugging me tightly. "I'm sorry I didn't stand up for you sooner." Other relatives, distant cousins, aunts, and uncles, who had witnessed my family's mistreatment, began reaching out with messages of support. It felt as if a veil had lifted, allowing genuine relationships to flourish where there had once been only obligation. Bless Stephen's family. They showered me with unwavering affection. His parents went above and beyond to make me feel loved, having witnessed my own family destroy me. We put a lot of effort into furnishing our new flat. Every item of furniture and every picture hanging on the wall became a symbol of the life we were creating together, one based on love, respect, and support for one another.